screen now.
Billions of people across the world have committed to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Undoubtedly, it has become a priority to mobilize people worldwide to accelerate the actions needed to achieve this goal. As the global week to act for SDGs begins, many questions will be asked. Can these goals be met? If they can be met, what do we need to do? Welcome to National Affairs.
This is National Affairs with Sunny Alausa Isa.
Hello and good morning. I'm Sani Alausa Isa. Thank you for joining me on National Affairs. The Global Week to Act for SDGs started yesterday and will go on until 25th of September. World leaders have gathered at the United Nations General Assembly to discuss issues that are pertinent to our planet. The focus this time is on climate, justice, and peace. The goal is to establish a more peaceful, just, and sustainable society. Let me welcome my guests to the show this morning. I have a full house, three people in the studio, and I'll start with the female among them. Tolulokwa Theresa Gbinro, she's the project lead of Space for Her, Brain Builders Youth Development Initiative. Good morning, Tolulokwa.
Good morning, Sunny.
I also have Chukwu Patrick Ifeanyi. He's the social entrepreneur and SDG advocate. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Sunny.
Also is Hussein Abdulbasit. He's a broadcaster and an SDG advocate. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Sunny. How are you?
Yes, thank you for joining me on National Affairs. So let's begin with the basics. And I'll start with Tolu. Tell us about the global goals. Give us a brief background.
All right, so in the year 2000, the United Nations sat together and they adopted the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, and by 2015, during the United Nations General Assembly, they adopted the SDG for peace, planet, prosperity, and profit. So the SDGs consist of 17 goals that aim to make the world a better place, to create an inclusive world and future for people around the world, and at the same time end poverty. So that's just the basics about the SDGs.
So, what's the purpose of the SDGs? Why do we need it at this time?
The SDGs are very important because the goal is to create a sustainable world, like I said, for peace, for planets. That includes the environment, taking care of our environment, protecting biodiversity, addressing issues related to climate change, for profit. So we have what is called social entrepreneurship or social impact, where you try to solve a problem in society and you make money from it. And then it's different from your basic business idea, because for a basic business idea, you just want to make money and then you don't care about the impact. And then we care about people because we are dealing with poverty and we are trying to make the world better for everyone. That's why we have goals like gender equality and reduce the inequalities between countries, just to reduce the margin between different countries.
Okay, so that's what the SDG is about. Now we are here in Nigeria. What do we need the SDGs for? Well, when some people hear SDGs, they think it's just a Western thing. So why is it important to us for us here in Nigeria?
Clearly, we can see that the country is at a very serious state, both development-wise, security-wise, and infrastructural-wise, and different other um, concerns we're currently faced with. So the SDGs basically is hoping to bring about a better life, a better world, a more developed world, a world where everybody have equal opportunity, have an environment to thrive, to express their best selves, have access to basic needs of life like education. So a country, developing countries like Nigeria needs the SDGs the most because here we have gross margin of people that are not educated. Most females, we don't have an equal or gender equality is something not to write home about here. So we have most females in some parts of Nigeria, even at today, who don't have access to quality and inclusive education. So it's very, very needed because there's so much to do. Despite all what we've done, there's still so much to do in Nigeria. Definitely, we need it here.
All right, let's narrow it down. The SDG is to protect planet. We're going to build a better system. We're going to achieve sustainability. But there are core issues that we have here in Nigeria: education, poverty, insecurity. How does the SDG? How do they address these core areas?
Yeah, thank you, Alausa. Um, at this point in time, it's imperative that we act local, but then we think globally, and that actually address, just like Pat actually, Chukwemeka actually said that, especially in this path of the world, that SDG is actually needed. But then, how do we address it? Is by taking education about the SDG to the grassroots level. Because most times when you talk about the SDG, more people actually think it as if it's actually a kind of discipline in the university. But then everybody is an actor. Each and every individual in the community is bound to inspire others to act. And how do you inspire people to act? It's not by asking them to bring money, but then, if you educate a primary four student in primary school about the SDG, that it's from the comfort of your room, you can actually lead people, and then you can ask your brothers and sisters to do the right things. So you're already asking them to act, and also to the larger community from our region leaders, because at the end of the day, they have the whole larger set of people on their platform to actually communicate to. So everything that the SDG actually house in its goals and agenda, it's high time that we take it to the grassroots level and ask people to be more, active, and to participate in achieving some of these goals.
Now you spoke about localizing the goals,
Yeah.
but for clarity,
Mm.
the people that are listening to us know that some of them have heard the SDGs. We're talking about how it's going to help improve the situation. So I want us to have basics, the elements in these goals that are priority to us here in Nigeria. That's what I want us to discuss. We have spoken about how the goals entirely can address many of our problems.
Sure.
Now, we have education. How does SDG address education? Let's take it one after the other. Tolu?
All right, so SDG addresses education in a really important area because a couple of the projects people carry out are in relation to education. But then let me break it down further because education is a basic human right and education is generally a human right. But a lot of people don't have access to quality education. And even in Nigeria, in some rural communities, you see truancy among students. So the government have these government schools, and then people are not even willing to get educated because they think Western education, or because they think education came from the West and is some form of taboo. And then illiteracy and ignorance often thrives in this community. So education is definitely really important and is a basic right for people to have access to education, at least up until their high school level.
So if we were to meet the goals by 2030, what kind of situation will we have in terms of education in Nigeria?
That would be to say that at least 90% of school children would have access to quality education and will be educated from basic pre-nursery to primary up until high school level. But then the education goal, which is SDG4, goes broader than that because it also has to do with technology involved. So if we're able to achieve education by providing access to quality education to these young people, then what's going to happen to the technology? I like to put it this way: if you go to a community and then you find out that they live in the forest and they use stones to create fire through friction. It's easy for you to say, okay, you want to teach them how to use a firewood, and then you want to teach them how to use charcoal, and then generations after generation, people would keep coming to teach them how to evolve. But then if you have the capacity and the ability to teach them straight up how to use clean energy in that community, then it will be easier, so that they won't have to go through the entire stage of evolving over a period of time. And it's the same thing I see with education. Sometimes when we try to cater for the goal of quality education, we just think set up a school and teach people the basic fundamentals, ABC, 1, 2, 3, addition, subtraction, and we don't care about the value of the education. So when those people even go through the system, there's a massive gap between those that have gone through the system and the generations ahead of them. So they will definitely need a reorientation for a new should I say, a new set of thought leaders and SDG advocates to teach them in terms of using technology and other things in relation to education.
So we have 8 years to 2030. In your assessment, are we making progress in terms of, because now the highest number of out of school children in the world are here in Nigeria. So the issues are still evident. Now we're saying that by 2030, we want to achieve the goal of ensuring that majority of that number are back in school, and not just back in school, they understand the value of education. On the path that we have currently, does it look like we're going to achieve that in 2030?
I'm not going to say it's unrealistic, because there are many factors to it, and then there could be a massive exponential increase in the number of social impact activities that we have, or in the number of people going into the educational sector, as we can see clearly. But then there's also the factor of population, right? So if you're trying to educate the number of people that are uneducated right now, and then you have a vast population of people, or should I say women, giving birth to children, twins, triplets, based on their fertility, then we are also not factoring that percentage into the growth. And then so many other things could happen, like in threats of cases like war, especially, should I say, climate mobility issues, where you have climate change and climate disasters affecting communities and forcing people to move because of flooding, as we can see predominantly in Lagos State right now. And then there are also issues of displacement by the Boko Haram sect or terrorist organization. So there are many factors involved. So I'm not necessarily going to give a specific answer to that, but I'm going to say if we work together and then we definitely have more people in the education sector, then it's definitely something we could achieve.
All right, if we work together, action, action, action. What are these actions? How effective have they been?
All right. Okay. Before I take that, to add to what she said, like she's saying, it's a matter of collective effort, right? We have at the moment quite a whole number of social enterprise and non-profits who are committed to achieving these goals, especially the education. I know a number of them right in Kwara State and in different parts of Nigeria. So the action is individually in our right. Individuals are supporting courses that are helping to take indigent children to school. That's as individuals. Then we have organizations, people starting up schools for free, people giving scholarships to indigent children to just support them, get them back into the classroom, who are revamping the state of education in schools. People are ensuring teachers are trained, they are equipped for the present and the future reality in education, taking tech, as that's the ed tech now, taking technology into classrooms. So to achieve SDG 4, which is quality and inclusive education, I say the action is multilateral, both from the government, from venture as the social entrepreneurs, from individuals who also can as well commit their money to supporting this cause. So it's everyone, both individually and collectively. That is only when we'll be sure that this is going to be realistic by 2030.
Okay, we've spoken about education. Another one that is a great concern to us as Nigeria is poverty. The poverty capital of the world that they call us. And in the last 6 to 7 years, it seems that the situation gets worse. Now, the way people are going down the poverty levels is outrageous. Now, efforts have been made. 2015, the SDGs began. We were talking about it. We are how many years into it now? 7 years, and we still have that level of poverty in Nigeria. What exactly is the problem?
You know, one beautiful thing about the SDG goals is how they are all interrelated. Because you cannot expect poverty to reduce when the quality of education, when we are yet to get to that level of the quality of education that we actually desire for. It's not possible. Because now we keep talking about poverty every day. She just talked about, you just asked her about how realistic is the quality of our education in 2030 with SDG. Then she mentioned it now. What about the level? We have to put or factor the level of the way women actually gives birth in the community. And then when you now look at the one of the SDG goals that has to do with improved financial stability, then are people putting some of these things into consideration? That's another question. And then another question is how you still get to see, just like Path just mentioned now, you still get to see how ready are we as people in this part of the world that some emerging conversations around educations that it just go beyond the four walls of the classroom. Here we have here is where we have we keep on producing graduates who come out in first class, who come out in second class, but they are not ready for conversations in the 21st century world. We are not ready to pick up skills in the 21st century world. So now you don't get to see that people who have went to school for like 20 years, who finished primary school, who finished secondary school, who finished university, but they are not even employed. How? What's the problem? So, and at the end of the day, these are people that actually come out in good grades. And this another thing. So poverty with even the educated class, and you have to keep asking yourself some of these questions. So one of the ways I feel that we can actually tackle or we can confront this is, one, we need to upgrade our education skills here in this part of the world. Like it just goes beyond the four walls of the classroom. If a student is actually is actually a student of literature, if as a student of literature, how can you market it? How can you become, an entrepreneur with your literature? If you have a child who is actually brilliant, with public speaking, how can that child get paid with that oratory skills? So these are some of the ways that we need to start, preparing for to tackle poverty in return. And also at the same time, all of us cannot just like you said one time in an event that the new dimension is that everybody want to go into tech, but all of us cannot go into tech. That's just the reality. So we have others that are doing other things that we also need to encourage them.
But your analysis have focused so much on the younger generation.
Yeah.
Now, poverty cuts across all spheres. And I think that what the SDGs should be able to do is to be inclusive in terms of all the people involved.
Sure.
So now, looking at the number of people that are in poverty, it's not just the young people.
Yeah.
It's the older generation. What kind of systems do SDG advocates preach for to ensure that we lift a larger number of these people, whether they have the tech skills, whether they're artisans, whatever the field they have? How, because the idea of innovation is not limited to the education. Now, innovation can come with artisans too. So, what systems are you preaching to get more people out of poverty, despite the economic crisis that, of course, it is not just here in Nigeria, it is global?
No, just like I said, we need to start acting local and think global. So the moment we start acting local, because most times, just like now, I think I like this question better. Most of our actions are not taken, especially in this part of the world. Apologies. Most of our actions, events, are not actually driving to the rural area. It's most times centered within the urban, within the cities and towns. So, but the moment you start, taking most of these projects, most of these initiatives to the people at the grassroots, the minimum, just like in public admin, they will say, but the bottom up approach. So you get to, have conversation, because at the end of the day, you cannot say you are talking about this thing enough, or we are talking about these things enough without involving the people at the grassroots level. So one of the things we need to start doing now is meet the people at the grassroots level, talk to the traditional rulers, talk to the religion leaders, because that's just the one of the best ways to get to keep people interest in, especially people at the grassroots level, into some of this into the vision of SDG. So the moment we do that, we'll be able to have free and open conversations with the people at the grassroots level. And one thing is, change is possible with everyone. Today, the younger generations are talking about tech. These people too can adapt only if we are ready to bring them into the system. And it's not going to be easy, in all honesty. It's not going to be easy, but then it's also possible.
Well, you have all spoken about action, action, action.
Mm.
We'll get to those actionable steps that you want people to take
Mm.
to achieve the SDGs. But one last area I want us to look at is the SDGs 3, good health and well-being. We're out of, should I say we are out of COVID-19?
Mm.
We still have COVID-19 around, but not, of course, as it was in 2020. It affected economies, and we saw the impact on our healthcare system. Now, SDG is looking forward to having healthier people, ensuring that we have better healthcare facilities. But with the current state of things in Nigeria, the current state of our healthcare system, what are the practical steps to take to ensure that we achieve a better institution in 2030? Especially, let's create a scenario. If there was to be a pandemic in 2030, what do we need to do now to prepare for them?
Okay, what we need to do now to prepare for unforeseen cases like pandemic, I think that's more of that's speaking more to the government, right? When you talk about the SDG 3, that's good health. I was trying to say initially that this even boils down to poverty, to then related to education. When people are not, people's basic need are not met. They don't drink good water. They don't feed well. They're not, like, nutrition is poor. They are bound to fall sick, right? We are in a country where poverty is at a very high level. People actually work, unlike some developed country where people have time to take break. Our people, think about Lagos, for instance. People work their ass out, doing most of their time on the road, eating crap just to get by, right? Those kind of people, you can never write their state of their health is not, will never be well written home about. So it takes individuals coming, at least raising the poverty line a bit higher. Then it comes to education. And what do I mean? Education, not just the normal conventional in-class education, training people, giving them empowerment schemes like Muhammad Yusuf did in Sri Lanka, raising entrepreneurs.
But the conversation about entrepreneurs, raising people, education. Now, I understand that these goals are interwoven, and
Yes.
for it to be achieved, there has to be a collaboration. In fact, the 17
Mm.
goals highlights that. Now, in terms of the healthcare sector, we'll see that what we currently have cannot cater to the needs of Nigerians.
Of course.
And we are still experiencing brain drain. People are leaving because the system does not work. Now, addressing specifically the healthcare system, what needs to change first to address the problem of people leaving? Because now, before we take the conversation to there's poverty, we have acknowledged those problems.
Yeah.
Now, with the current system that we have, what do we need to fix internally?
I feel, like I said initially, it's a matter of the government providing a safe environment for people, for such to thrive. It's an institutional problem, and that might also even make you to say a leadership problem in a way, and to also spend the spotlight on people electing the right leaders, since we are in that time now. So this is more of an institutional issue. Like, people, there's no safe space for such to thrive. That's what necessitates the brilliant ones among us to want to leave and find a better place, a proposed greener pasture, right? So I feel the government should just should look into empowering the health workers, providing necessary institutional needs for such. That's right.
All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be flipping the script.
All right.
This is National Affairs with Sunny Alausa Isa.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Diamond 88.7 FM in Ilorin, and the program is National Affairs. Our conversation this morning is about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we can localize these goals to achieve sustainability in 2030. Now, before we went on break, we were talking about the core issues as particular to Nigeria, since we are localizing the goals. Now, the agenda for this week, the Global Week Act for SDGs, I say that the theme is flip the script. What are we flipping, Tolulope?
Well, basically, flip the script is basically saying do something different, and in particular areas, to be precise, focuses on climate, justice, and peace. But it doesn't go to say that if you flip the script in any other area or sector in relation to the SDG, that it is invalid. And another very popular hashtag is act for SDG. So it's basically saying take an action for the SDGs, or just act, just do something. Because sometimes we think we have to, be an NGO, you have to work with government, you have to be a big person to do something really important. But the little impact you make still counts, because impact is still impact.
Okay, there are three key areas this time, and climate, justice, and peace. Now, I want to start with climate. A lot of people have heard about climate change. Some people still don't believe there's anything like that, and we continue to see the impact. It's not just in agriculture, for example. We see insecurity, the farmer elders crisis. A lot of people do not know how much role that climate change plays in that. I want you to give us an analysis of what climate change is, why it is a problem here, and what we need to do to address it.
All right, so I'll just break down the fundamentals. First, I'll start with weather. Weather refers to the climatic condition of a place at a particular time, while climate refers to the average weather condition of a place. So you can take the average weather condition of Kwara State, average weather condition of Ilorin, average weather condition of North Central, average weather condition of Nigeria over a period of 30 to 35 years. And then climate change, or a changing climate, basically means a change in the climate of a particular area. But then this time we're talking about a change in the climate of the world, because it is a general change that can be felt everywhere, regardless of how in some area it may be slightly to their benefit, but it's not a positive change. So take, for instance, to break climate change down, I would like to use the example of the seasons. In Nigeria, we basically have the dry and wet seasons. And in August, we are really happy and enthusiastic about what we normally call the August break. But then for the past 3 years, the August break has not really been a thing. And then there has been the changing climate. So oftentimes you see that the Hamatan season runs up till March. And sometimes the rainy season doesn't even start until June, July. So that's a very clear example of climate change. Another very basic example of climate change that we choose to ignore is the sun. And then for people bleaching, if you were bleaching maybe 5 years ago, you probably won't even notice that you were bleaching until maybe the day the person dies and the person is in the mortuary and whatever happens to their body. But this day, if you are bleaching, after weeks or months, you begin to see the whole pink patches that turn green, that turn black, that turn gray, just like different kind of color on people. Have resistant crops now. So a few years ago, if you would plant a hub of corn and you want to buy corn, you would buy a very big corn for 15 naira, or two for 15 naira. But now, even the corn that they are selling for 100 naira, it's difficult to find a corn hub that is big, because the climate is changing and then the plants are becoming resistant and trying to adapt. Another practical example is yam, because we're already in the yam season, right? Years ago, you would buy yam and you would be struggling to carry one yam inside your house. You wouldn't just buy 2 tubers of yam and it could last your family for maybe 2 weeks or 1 month, depending on how much you eat. But now these days, everybody's trying to buy either the small 6 tubers of yam for 1.5 or the big 6 tubers of yam for 3,000 naira. So it's definitely not the same in that area. And then one of the things that we don't even pay attention to a lot is flooding, right? Around the world, people talk about what we call wildfires, where vegetation becomes so dry and then vegetation just on its own catches fire. Earlier I made the illustration about friction between stones catching fire, and then people will just say it's the Western world, anything works there. Maybe their own demon is white demon, is educated demon. We don't take those things as important. But now there's literally flooding everywhere. These days you can't even predict the weather. You come outside and you're looking at the cloud. Is the cloud moving this way? Is it rain cloud or is it not rain cloud? and you don't know what's going on. So yeah, those are definitely evidences that climate is changing. Let me even give a very practical one. Earlier this year in Ilorin, a lot of people disconnected their taps, their external taps. Normally, everybody wants to, provide free water, especially since it's an Islamic environment for people to wash. But people were reducing their taps, removing their external taps. Why? Because the water quantity in the well was drying. So it does not just affect the surface, it also shows that we have a basic problem to deal with in terms of our groundwater.
Now, you have given us the background to climate crisis. That our listeners want to know: is this a bad thing? If it is, what do we need to do?
Okay, it is a bad thing. And then I'm just going to give this illustration. It's a very funny illustration. When we were younger, we would pray for days where it would rain so that we will not go to school. But then these days, it rains every day, and sometimes you're like, will I not sell? Will I not make money? Because it's definitely changing. And then there's something called climate anxiety, and it basically affects the younger generation. That's the Gen Z downward, where you think about all the bad things that are happening, and then you're like, if I give birth now, what would happen when my child is 20 something? Or what would happen when my child is 30 something because of the changing climate? Especially the area of food resilience. That's enough issue for us to be bothered about. Another issue for us to be bothered about is the issue of climate and water. And I think it's something we are not taking very important, because the water cycle is affected. In fact, the water cycle factors the sun and is a very important factor. So let me put it this way. When rain falls, evaporation happens, and then the whole condensation, and then rain falls again. That's a basic water cycle. But then when rain falls and then the water that comes to the ground is too much, and then the aquifers are saturated and the waters can't go in, right? After a period of time, you have flooding. One evil sun comes up, it dries up the water, you're happy. But then you don't realize that the sun that has come out has also reduced the quantity of water. So you're not going to have that same quantity of water that you would have in circulation. Right now, when you go to a flooded area, you think there's so much water. But the truth is that the water in circulation is actually reducing. And then water is life, because from water you get oxygen, you feed from water.
So what do we need to do?
What do we need to do? The basic thing is awareness on climate change. It's very easy to sit down and say, the weather just day hot like before, and then you choose to ignore the reality of these things. Like today is World Cleanup Day, and then you have Society Vibe, Global Shapers, Ilorin, BBYDI, and so many other organizations that came together yearly, that came together in Kwara State to just create awareness on waste. And we don't take waste recycling so important. Your PET bottles, your metals, basically non-biodegradable waste.
I want you to clarify an area that I'm sure many of my listeners will be interested in. Now, this is nature. What we are experiencing is nature. Now, many people would believe that they don't have power over nature because nature dictates what it does itself. So what are these steps that you are saying that they can take to influence the impact of nature?
All right. So one basic step would be, we take sachet water or sachet water a lot, and then we also like to take Coke, Fanta, Pepsi. We have so many bottles, normal plastic bottles that we would call in industrial term PET bottles. When you take those things, don't throw them inside the gutter. Don't throw them on the road. Dispose your waste properly. And then this is not something that just has to do with people or individuals. It also goes far to the government, because if you have people in the private sector, there's a limit to what they can do. If you don't have structures and policies that guide plastic recycling, and if you don't have government agencies that focus on recycling, but be accountable, right? So if you see someone dropping something on the floor, tell them to please pick it up and drop it in a bin. You don't have to be a police to tell them to do that. You don't have to have gone to university to say that. Another basic one would be in terms of burning, because I know in Ilorin we burn a lot. It's something that almost everybody has a space in their house where they burn refuse, and then we don't understand that CO2 emission is definitely affecting the environment, especially with the flooding situation. Recently in Lagos State, their law enforcement agency, in terms of their waste agency, was basically arresting people and telling them they should stop burning waste and they should stop burning waste. But then it goes beyond that, because if the government is not doing enough and we don't have places to properly dispose this waste, if we don't have structure to cater for this waste properly, then it will become difficult for individuals to play their part. But then playing our part also has to do with accountability, and I would say recycling, right? So you have food waste and you have biodegradable waste. You know, if you eat corn and throw inside gutter, which is not a good place to throw corn anyway, but you know, after a time, the corn would decompose, right? Because it is nature. So you could do those things. You have your yam peel. Thank God we eat yam peel in this place. So there are so many other things we could do with food waste, but separate food waste from plastic, from paper, from metals. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Peace and justice. And because our time is fast spent, we'll go through this quickly. Patrick, inclusive society, justice, peace. What is it all about, and what do we need to do as a country to achieve this?
Okay, it's basically a state where we have a peaceful environment where people have justice system is of course by power and things are going as it should be because currently in Nigeria we know insecurity is a huge thing we are facing. Talk about what is happening in the far north. So what do we need to do as individuals? And like she said, essentially we should look at um, more in education because this is more of a government agencies setting doing their best. Our government being accountable, the military and what some people claim it's a political the sustained insecurity is quite political. That's what some people claim. That's just by the way. But as individuals, what can we do? We should engage more in preaching the gospel of peace, and that's what Flip the Script is about. We're flipping, letting people know that this should not be business as usual. An Igbo man should see an Hausa man and not see tribe, but see them.
Yeah, thank you, Lausa. Let me just extract from the illustration of path, and then it's certainly reminded about a conversation between Zeke and Saudauna of Sokoto. That Zeke said, "We need to forget our differences." Then Saudauna said, "We don't need to forget our differences, but we need to understand our differences because at the end of the day, our world, our society cannot enjoy any relevant peace unless the justice system is working and we are not just easing at our affairs or issues."
Thank you very much for joining me on National Affairs this morning. It has been a wonderful conversation, and the conversation about SDGs is ongoing. It's not something we could have in about 1 hour. And I'm sure that we'll continue to have this conversation so we sensitize more people about their roles and responsibilities in achieving sustainability by 2030. That's the size of our package this morning. And until next week when we meet again on National Affairs, I am Sani Alausa Isa.